News.
Good evening, I'm Shane Jones, leading the news at 7. Barbados drinking water is safe. That's the unequivocal message sent by Foreign Affairs Minister Senator Maxine McLean at a press conference this afternoon. Well, that's a big story in our newscast tonight. And Lisa Broom, she's upstairs in the newsroom working on it, and we'll have it for you a little later in the newscast. Well, government is working with officials from the United States to understand the latest statement issued by the U.S. Embassy. That's according to Tourism Minister Richard Seeley, who has described the message as cryptic. He made the comments at a tour of Flagstaff Road in his constituency, which is undergoing major roadworks. We get more in this Sharika Griffith report.
In the statement published on the U.S. Embassy's website on Thursday, the embassy advised residents that recent tests had revealed higher than normal levels of bacteria in the tap water. The embassy has therefore recommended that staff boil their drinking water or use bottled water. In response, Tourism Minister Richard Seeley says he's seeking more information before he comments. To that end, he says government has reached out to officials at the U.S. Embassy.
Like you, I saw the note. It is a very cryptic note. It is in very general terms, and frankly speaking, it is impossible for me to comment in a paucity of further information. I can assure you, again, I'm speaking as a member of the government, that the government is engaging with the U.S. officials, and we're trying to understand what that comment is all about. As you would appreciate, it really doesn't say much.
This is the second time for the year the embassy has issued a health alert on Barbados. The first one was related to overflowing sewage on the South Coast. In the first statement, published on January 10th, the U.S. stated that mechanical failure on the South Coast had resulted in an overflow of raw sewage, which was affecting the water quality at certain beaches between the Hastings and St. Lawrence Gap areas. Visitors and staff were advised to avoid water activities in the affected areas, as well as to wash any body parts or clothing which might have come in contact with sewage. When asked if tourism officials were concerned about the impact of the sewage crisis on tourist arrivals, Minister Seeley had this to say.
I am satisfied that at tourism we are doing everything we are supposed to do insofar as making sure brand Barbados is pushed in our traditional markets, in our new source markets. We are seeing results, tremendous results. We have in fact gone past not 650 but 660,000 for 2017, so we are going in the right direction, and the issues on the South Coast are being addressed by the Barbados Water Authority.
Following another record year for visitor arrivals in 2017, tourism officials remain optimistic that visitors will continue to choose Barbados as their Caribbean destination of choice for 2018. Sharika Griffith, Cbc News.
Thanks, Sharika. Well, one day after it was revealed that a specific food business was the source of the recent outbreak of gastroenteritis on the South Coast, a local doctor has been reminding restaurants of how to prevent spreading the contagious virus. General practitioner at Blackrock Medical Clinic, Dr. Shannon Carrington, said careful attention should be paid to best practices.
Firstly, make sure that your employees know about proper hand washing techniques, and it's just not simple as putting your hands on the water and running it for a couple seconds. You have to make sure you use soap. Make sure that your palms are clean, behind your hands are clean, fingernails underneath the fingernails, and this has to happen for at least 20 to 30 seconds with a soap. Make sure when you're drying your hand as well that you use a paper towel that is disposable rather than a towel that you have to be using over and over again, because it's going to trap bacteria. And you find then that your hands are clean, but then you go and contaminate it again with drying your hands. Another thing would be just be mindful of what the symptoms are. So if you're an employee and you know that you have a fever, or you get symptoms such as diarrhea or vomiting, make sure you let your employer know immediately and you seek medical attention.
Dr. Carrington also urged restaurant staff to focus on their surfaces.
Before and after every day, make sure that they're well sanitized. If you have a sitting area that is outside, make sure that you focus on the outside environments as well, because not only will your humans come into contact with the surfaces, but then you have insects, flies that would inevitably bring bacteria to these surfaces. So you have to pay special attention to the outside as well as the inside environments.
Okay, we'll take a short break here and come back with more news. Government has not turned its back on residents of St. Sylvan's Village in St. Andrew. This assurance from Minister of Transport and Works Michael Lashley. His comments come almost a week after a portion of the road in the area known as Dark Hole collapsed after heavy rains. Since then, access has been limited as Transport Board buses are now unable to travel that road.
We are not basically turning a blind eye to what's happening at Dark Hole. As soon as it happened, the Sunday, I got a call from my technical team and they're on the job. So it would take some time. It's not an easy fix because of, that's the Scotland district area. So we have to pay close attention to it. I'm not an engineer, but speaking to my technical team and listening to the technical advice from them, my information is that we have to handle it very carefully. And of course, I want to assure the residents that we will find a solution for them.
A political analyst wants the National Union of Public Workers to stand on principles and tell its membership that the demand for a pay increase is unreasonable at this time. Maureen Holder says the union should be mindful of the current economic challenges facing the government. Delivering the Astor B. Watts lunchtime lecture at DLP headquarters, Ms. Holder wondered why workers want the NSRL removed when it is serving a public good.
The public servants would know that the NSRL, that's the National Social Responsibility Levy, by virtue is keeping them employed and still would co-op with unions against the NSRL tax. Without that tax, it means further displacement of thousands of public sector workers. Now tell me, when union bosses lead private sector workers into strike actions, how are their salaries impacted? We all know that public sector workers' salaries are impacted and there's no strike fund.
And Ms. Holder is questioning some of the motives of the private sector.
I find it strange that it's being said by some private sector businesses that they are holding on to their monies and do not want to invest under this administration and are waiting for a change in administration to put their hands to the plow and rescue this nation, if they could. Because I have this feeling that the private sector too is also cash-strapped. Look at the amount of Trinidadian investments in our economy. Such thinking is so anti-nationalistic, unpatriotic, and self-deprecating, especially when there's so much uncertainty out there.
Two people heavily involved in the fight against drugs in Barbados fully support parents searching their children and the spaces they occupy in the home. Magistrate Graveney Bannister says this will help to ensure they are not involved in drugs or any other nefarious activity. Bannister, who is in charge of the drug treatment court, says very often parents are unaware of what their children are doing. But he says parents have complete jurisdiction in their homes and can search at their discretion.
What I'm referring to is searches of bags and searches of drawers and mattresses. It can be done in the presence of the child, or it can be done discreetly. You own the house, the child don't own the house, so what's wrong with carrying out a search? And if you find something, why not confront the child and try to find help?
Okay, let's go back to that big story tonight. The report from Lisa Broom is now in, and that's on the press conference by the Foreign Affairs Minister, Senator Maxine McLean, declaring that Barbados' drinking water is safe.
Barbados' potable water is safe.
That was the message sent by Senator McLean at a press conference called in response to the alert issued on Thursday by the U.S. Embassy here in Barbados, citing concerns about the quality of the island's drinking water given the sewage problems on the south coast. Senator McLean also revealed that she, along with Health Minister John Boyce, General Manager of the BWA, Keith Roy Halliday, and others met with officials from the U.S. Embassy, led by Ambassador Linda Tagliatella. It was in that meeting that the U.S. officials revealed they conducted tests at 5 of the 68 residences they own on the South Coast, including Enterprise, Graham Hall, and Atlantic Shores.
It was not until today at the meeting of the Barbados Water Authority and Ministry of Health officials that they were made aware of the properties at which these samples were taken. Let me emphasize that we were informed by the embassy officials that the laboratory tests were negative for Salmonella, coliform, and E. coli, which would be of primary public health concern.
Mr. Halliday pointed out that the drinking water supplied to the residences have different sources.
They're not the same as the potable water supply that, for instance, supplies the Hastings area, Hastings and Worthing. So you'll have Graham Hall, which has a separate supply as well from, I believe, the Enterprise area as well. So it makes quite an interesting mix, really.
Meantime, Senator McLean added that the two sides have agreed to a process going forward.
I took the opportunity to ask the United States of America representatives to permit the collection of water samples on the properties that were tested. And in the case of future tests, we have asked that there be simultaneous collection of samples. To these requests, the embassy has agreed to a collaborative process with the Ministry of Health and the Barbados Water Authority.
And Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anton Best, who has been identified as the point person to work with the U.S. Embassy on the matter, says no specific information was given about the lab, the processes, or the methodologies used to carry out the tests.
The test result that was of concern was a total bacterial count, something that is very non-specific. And from our perspective, it wasn't a very analytical test because when you get a result like that, there are a lot more tests that have to be done to determine the source and to determine the significance of finding bacteria in water.
Senator McLean says there is no indication that the U.S. Embassy will retract or amend the alert, which they said was issued because they have certain protocols to follow. Lisa Broom, CBC News.
Thanks, Lisa. An increase in the number of female students at the Edna Nichols Center reflects a surge of females involved in deviant behavior. That government-operated center runs a 2-week program for at-risk secondary school students. Program manager Deborah Hewitt says for the first time last year, there were more girls than boys.
The ratio is usually 3-to-1, but last year the ratio somehow went 2-to-1. We had an influx of girls, right? But the trend over the last many years, many years, more boys than girls.
Ms. Hewitt was speaking to CBC News following the reopening of the Boscobel St. Peter Institution. She also debunked the belief that the facility returns perfect students.
We do not send back the perfect child. People have the impression that, we're wasting time because they don't see a perfect child going back. But that will not happen, right? But you do send back the child who now had interventions, who had the opportunity to get a timeout, to breathe, and to work with professionals to, help them get back on track.
A local pharmacist believes Barbados needs more policies and facilities to address the care of its growing elderly population. That's the view of Paul Gibson. He says the number of seniors will be at record levels in the next 2 decades. He was speaking at a recent NCSA lecture entitled Drugs and Seniors at the Church of God in Chelsea Road.
If we are preparing for those old people, in 20 years, we're going to have an amazing number of elderly in this country. We don't have enough nursing homes. We don't have enough physiotherapy. We don't have enough. So I'm concerned that we need to start to prepare for these things happening. It is coming. It's coming. We need to be ready. We don't want anybody touching our pensions. We don't want anybody touching anything to do with our old age because we want our money when we get a certain age.
Mr. Gibson also shared some steps individuals can take at home to prepare for their golden years, such as downsizing their living spaces.
Even in terms of preparing our home, begin to put an extra room on if you live upstairs, put the tenant upstairs and you come downstairs, because at some point in time you're going to have to do it. And it is easier to prepare to do it now or to create a room downstairs where you don't want a whole house. You know, people go at 60 and 70 and build a massive mansion. 16 bedrooms and 14 bathrooms and 14 dogs, you know? But a time is coming when, unless you are not wearing out, so you don't want to be walking around cleaning.
The 12 days of Christmas may have finished weeks ago, but several lucky Barbadians now have thousands of reasons to celebrate once more. That's because they walked away with $80,000 in cash and other prizes. The winners, who shopped at courts over the Christmas period, collected their prizes during a ceremony outside the flagship store in Bridgetown. Sharika Griffith has more.
When the lucky people arrived at Jubilee Gardens in the city, the only thing they knew for sure was that they had won something. They just had no idea what that something was, but they did not have to wait long to find out. Winners of the first competition, the Court's Thank You Sweepstakes, had the cost of their purchase completely written off. Lasanta Johnson was one of 4 lucky winners. Johnson, who purchased a smart TV, says it's the first time she's won anything.
Great! To see that I get a TV free and I don't have to purchase it. Yeah.
Right, so what are you planning to do with the funds then, since you don't have to pay for the TV anymore?
Save for my son.
The Whirlpool cash-in promotion dished out a total of $40,000 to 4 lucky shoppers. Gloria Wigaba, a rehabilitation therapy student at the Barbados Community College, was one of them. She says she purchased a stove in preparations for the Christmas holiday, but was nonetheless surprised to get a call from courts.
I didn't sign up for one competition, so I was like, would I really win the 10,000 or is it something else? But either way, I just came.
So tell me, what are your plans for the money?
Tuition fees, and then I'll figure out after that.
The prize of free designer eyewear for the rest of their lives went to these two, Natisha Ward and Trevor Burke. But perhaps the most exciting part of the prize-giving ceremony was the bonus round of the Crack the Courts Code promotion. After 3 tries each, none of the 4 competitors had managed to unlock the safe. However, after additional hints, David Harris figured out the winning combination and secured the grand prize of $20,000.
I actually put in 226, meaning 6 for 6 roads. And it was actually 225, but I realized how close I was. And I said, geez, when it was, wow, I said, wow. And then when she gave the other part of the clue, I said, good, got it.
Harris, who purchased a fridge and a solar heater, plans to use a portion of his winnings to take care of some expenses and save the rest. Between presentations, winners and others who gathered to watch were kept entertained by performances by the Adrenaline Dancers, a steel pan performance by Brittany Lane, and the sweet songs of Biggie Irie and the orange-haired songbird Nikita. Sharika Griffith, CBC News.
Still to come, a look at some of the stories making headlines across the Caribbean. The opposition St. Lucia Labour Party has expressed concern about Prime Minister Alan Chastain's recent comments on state-backed assistance for teenage mothers under the age of 18. We get more in this report from HTS News.
During an appearance on a talk show, the Prime Minister suggested that the state should be willing to assist a teenaged mother with her first child. However, he argues mothers who lack the financial means to take care of additional children should not have custody of them. The remarks have sparked debate about reproductive rights. Denry North MP Sean Edward, who condemns the statements, warns against compulsory adoption, calling on the government to check its biases on social issues at the door.
The Prime Minister's statement exposes gross insensitivity at best and at worst a callous disregard for the rights of parents and the affinity that parents, especially mothers, have for their children. Government must at all times demonstrate empathy for the challenges confronting families and seek humane ways to help them, especially the less fortunate ones in the society. What Prime Minister Alan Chastain is contemplating belongs to a part of our history which we should be afraid of, and we hope will never be reenacted.
Reproductive rights involve an individual's decision to plan a family, terminate a pregnancy, use contraceptives, receive sex education, and gain access to reproductive health services. The SLP argues, given the complexity of such social issues, greater emphasis on evidence-based solutions is needed to devise public policy that not only addresses the problem, but also treats people with compassion.
Media workers in Guyana staged a walkout from the opening session of the 2018 Guyana Defense Force Officers Conference. The message was "Enough is enough." Javon Vickery was among the 19 journalists who walked out.
For the second consecutive year, the administration of the Guyana Defense Force invited the media to the Army's annual Officers Conference and kept media workers incommunicado while the opening session of the conference was in progress. Media workers had arrived at base camp in Ghana at least 30 minutes in advance of the commencement of the conference, as stipulated by the GDF, but were only allowed to enter the conference area when the Chief of Staff had almost completed his remarks. Preparations to accommodate television crews was so poor that even seating arrangements for media representatives were non-existent, but media workers attached to the State Department of Public Information were allowed to video the proceedings comfortably. 19 media workers walked out. As media workers continue to make their way out of the compound, head of the GDF Public Affairs Unit Colonel Michael Shahood requested that everyone return to the mess hall, but this request was jointly denied. Colonel Shahood then sought an audience with Vice President of the Ghana Press Association, Zoyce Fraser. The colonel explained that for the past 2 years, the GDF had taken a decision to exclude the media from observing the Chief of Staff's address due to the sensitivity of military information, but this change of protocol was never conveyed to the media. Colonel Shahood was then questioned by the media.
But then how bad would it look for now the members of the media for walking in the middle of the president?
Because, like I said, the conference has taken on a new dimension, right?
But so do you feel
I
nice
want to
with
kindly
this?
appeal to you one last time to come here, establish equipment, because at this point in time is when we will know.
No, we're not doing that now.
The GPA in a statement condemned the act, saying, quote, "The media do not work in a vacuum, and media operatives should be treated with the respect they deserve."
Taxi drivers and tour operators in the Bahamas have had their fair share of issues, with some claiming business is not being shared fairly. It's an issue the Transport Minister recently addressed.
Taxi drivers have been complaining about the decline of business in the country over the years. The Minister of Transport and Local Government, the Honorable Frankie Campbell, admits that there is a hustle in the transportation industry in Grand Bahama and New Providence, where no one feels as if they are getting a fair share of the pie.
We have to determine how to make this pie bigger and use some razor-thin cutting knife so that everyone can get a piece of this pie. But we are working towards that.
The minister says, according to the law, any visitor can pre-arrange a ride with a tour operator, and it is important for all taxi drivers to invest in their business.
And then they have an obligation to sell themselves. With any business, there is a need to ensure that you have repeat customers. And one way for taxi drivers, bus drivers, and anybody else who's in business to ensure repeat customers is by making sure that that initial visit is so well remembered that the person wants to come back again.
He adds that technology is growing each and every day, and those in the business can benefit from the advancement.
Because of all the communication devices available, taxi drivers and anybody else have the ability to sell themselves. And so a visitor can arrive and say that I'm waiting for taxi number 750 because I would have spoken to him in advance and he is coming to collect me.
While the ministry moves to bring about a level playing field among taxi drivers and tour operators, the minister said his unit will also be cracking down on hacking in the taxi business.
Okay, we're going to check in about the latest in the world of sports after the break, but before we get there, here's a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Bloodshot eyes, dry mouth, loss of interest in personal hygiene or appearance, and brown or burnt fingertips are all signs of marijuana use. This tip is brought to you in association with the National Council on Substance Abuse, promoting drug awareness.